There is a new startup called Inception Point AI that is mass producing more than 3,000 AI generated podcast episodes every week at $1 per episode.
Is the era of creative ad agencies over, or is Amazon just making everyone a creative powerhouse overnight?
How about if you let AI manage your purchasing? Would you turn your credit card over to an AI agent?
Google's Gemini is moving from the sidelines to the center of the Chrome experience and becoming free for everybody.
What if your glasses could respond to your thoughts before you even move or react to them?
What happens when a government replaces a minister with artificial intelligence?
Can AI predict your future health years or actually even decades in advance?
Google dropped a new Vault Gemma, its first privacy-preserving language model designed so that your data doesn't become tomorrow's autocomplete in Gemini.
Getting accused of stealing the lifeblood of publishing. Rolling Stone's parent company, Penske Media, thinks that's what Google is doing, and they're taking Google to court. OpenAI have unveiled sweeping new protections for teenage ChatGPT users, which is a pretty unprecedented move for the generative AI space.
Andy, do you follow the App Store charts? Is this a thing people follow them, like the box office charts and the billboard charts and whatever? Do you follow these?
I do not follow the App Store charts. That's something I have not been able to work into my weekly schedule yet. How about you? I assume you do, since you're asking.
Don't normally, but this week it hit my news chart because Gemini's app has hit #1 on the App Store on the back of the Nano Banana image editing capabilities we saw last week. So everybody out there doing their cool things on Nano Banana, Gemini now hit #1 on the App Store.
I am not super shocked about that. Nano Banana was like a popular thing. You were playing around with it. I saw some cool Nano Banana stuff coming out from you.
I did. I hear the big thing is to make 3D figurines of yourself, like action figure kind of thing. So I did. It made a bobblehead of me. And then this is so popular that Google actually published the prompt that they suggest for making a 3D action figure in the right environment of yourself. So I was definitely playing around. I put myself behind the Resolute desk and in the Oval Office and doing all sorts of funky things. And it's a pretty fun thing to play with and pretty impressive. And I can see how it jumped up. But Google's got to be loving that they've got a #1 AI app, a #1 app that is their AI app, which is a first for them, I think, to get Gemini up to the top. So there you go, Nano Banana, and a fun name. Like, just keep using the secret code names. They're much better than the actual names you give things.
I know, so much fun. Fun to play with, fun name, fun story. Well, our first story this week is a little bit nearer and dearer to our hearts as podcasters. Has me wondering if you and I will have this gig for much longer. But so what happens when podcasts start scaling like TikTok? There is a new startup called Inception Point AI that is mass producing more than 3,000 AI generated podcast episode every week at a cost every week, 3,000 a week at the staggeringly low cost of $1 per episode.
Wow. So there 3,000 episodes a week is a lot of content. How is AI powered? What is that? I mean, it has to be how they're doing 3,000 a week. It couldn't get hosts to do that. I don't think there's enough hours in the day. Be a lot of people, but like, how are they doing this?
Well, so the company is founded by former Wondery exec Janine Wright, and it's a network of 5,000 shows under its Quiet Please podcast network. Topics range from hyper niche hobbies to daily weather updates. And they're using a combination of AI tools. They're using ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, basically all of the models that we talk about so much on the pod. And they use 184 different AI agents as part of this process to do things like researching, scripting, voice, publish episodes, all in about an hour.
That's pretty crazy. I do worry, like, are we replaceable by AI now? I don't know. I would judge myself based on which AI replaced me. Was it my Claude or my Perplexity or my Gemini or my ChatGPT? I don't know. I'll have to take bets on that.
What is your avatar going to look like? They have this sort of like dystopian view on their website. If you look at it, that's basically like, we think in some short amount of time, half the people in the world will be AIs or something like that. And so they are trying to speed up that process by making all of these different AI personalities and having them talk about these nichey things on prolific podcast episodes.
A lot of niche is kind of interesting. It really is this kind of, can you generate very niche specific content for, like daily weather, but super easy to do, I guess, in this context. But $1 an episode, $3,000 a week ain't nothing. What's the business model? What are they? I mean, podcasts, I don't get any money we don't get a lot of money from this one. And I don't think you could take your AI avatars on the talking circuit, get you on the speaker circuit and the advisor gig. So what's the business model here?
Not surprisingly, just like so many things on the internet, programmatic ads, that's the business model. So with these different ad placements, the break-even point for a podcast episode is just 20 listeners. So if you get 20 listeners to listen to the episode, you have broke even on your $1 investment. And then once that threshold is crossed, every episode is profitable. So the strategy is not about trying to get to the top of the podcast charts, like we were just talking about the top of the app store charts. It's literally just to get sort of scale and saturation and get a lot of content out there, whatever, 30, 40, 50 people listening to an episode every week, and just generating small amounts of profits per show that add up in the long term.
I want the hot take on this, which is like, this is going to be the AI slop of the podcasting space, the kind of boring content. Is the presence of content like this going to diminish the value of real human voices? Like, are we out of a job, or is it going to, maybe even there's some argument that it will increase the value of authentic humans and the desire, the way some people like handmade objects, the one like to know the human behind the content. So what do you think? Where is this headed in terms of popularity and what it does to human hosts? Like, what's the future of what the AI maybe is all about? Where are we out of a job?
I think people have feelings about this. So like there's hot takes on both sides. Obviously like the critical viewpoint is you're just gonna flood the space with a bunch of like really cheap automated output that isn't for super high quality. This company sort of hits back and says, if you're a detractor, you're a lazy Luddite, which I
Lean into, if you're
love
going to be
the
aggressive,
term.
just lean into the aggressive. I
Lean
love it.
in. Yeah, lazy Luddite. And her framing is basically that AI isn't replacing creative storytelling here. It's filling like a long tail demand where humans aren't producing content today. That's honestly hard for me to believe because I feel like there is already a long tail of random content being produced on the internet. But she feels like there is not enough. So that there are these really niche-y spaces that apparently 30 people want to hear about or talk about that are not being talked about on the internet today, and her AI can produce a podcast about them. But it does sort of beg the question that you just sort of asked, which is about like maybe then in the future, if the space is genuinely flooded with content about anything everywhere, maybe premium, well thought out human creativity will become more desirable, similar to like fast fashion has made high-end tailoring more desirable. It feels more like a luxury, and so maybe this will make human creativity more valuable. So maybe actually, Jeff, instead of getting canceled, we'll get paid for doing our podcast. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I'll keep my fingers crossed for that one. That sounds nice. I do think there will. I think there's this pushback towards handmade, human curated, understanding the craft that goes into something, and also the personalities, the people, the individuals behind them. People want to, like almost all shows, they hook you on plot a little bit, but mostly in character. Like you get invested in the people, and I think the best podcasts have a sense of that and being invested in the people. And so maybe that's the hope for the human podcasters out there. But if you want a super niche podcast, apparently you can go find it on the Quiet Please podcast. That's also a good name. I like that name.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Well, if you're not into AI generated podcasts, how about AI generated advertising campaigns? That's when we could get there. So, is the era of creative ad agencies over, or is Amazon just making everyone a creative powerhouse overnight? This week out at Amazon, their ads launching a groundbreaking agentic AI tool designed to put the capabilities of a top tier creative agency at the fingertips of every advertiser, big or small. I love this quote from their VP of Amazon Ads, Jay Richmond. This is about more than speed. It's about giving every advertiser and agency access to the kinds of strategic, high quality creative support that once only large brands could afford. So we've leaned into this message before of AI not being cheaper, better, faster, but like actually unlocking higher quality for a lower cost and making it more accessible, which I think is great.
Yeah, it's super great. So what does the AI actually do? Is it more than just copywriting? What does it actually provide for a company that's using it?
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the Adobe story we had last week. Everybody with an A apparently wants to be in the advertising business.
A is for advertising.
A is for advertising. That's right. A new kids book, the internet version of the children's book. A is for advertising. So this is a lot more than just copywriting, though. It can do strategizing and brainstorming on creatives as well as campaigns. It can handle the entire creative process end to end, write multi-scene scripts, create custom images, animate scenes, add voiceovers, add music, and output both high impact video and display ads. So kind of taking the whole creative process from some ideas that you have and brainstorm with it through actual execution of the creation of those assets. So that's a lot of stuff it can do.
It's a lot of stuff. And so who's the target audience who's going to actually be customers of such a technology?
Yeah, I mean, they talk about advertising agencies, but I think the real focus here is on leveling the playing field for small and medium businesses, right? I mean, a lot of these businesses are native to the internet. They rely heavily on internet-based advertising through all the different platforms, and this is really about accelerating their ability to launch campaigns, put in sophisticated brand strategies, and make higher quality content and advertisements. The kind of thing that was kind of restricted to the Fortune 500 with big budgets and millions of dollars and Madison Avenue advertising agencies. And their goal is to get that same kind of quality down to the SMBs, which is a kind of empowering message. And it's one of those things I love to see when AI is being used to to broaden access to a high-end capability as opposed to displacing people necessarily.
Yeah. Well, you can put me down as a no for the mass-produced content, but as a yes for this one because I love the idea of just putting more tools in the hands of small business owners and letting them compete with larger companies with much deeper pockets. So I am a fan of that. But in case you're not, how about if you let AI manage your purchasing? Would you turn your credit card over to an AI agent? Google just unveiled the Agent Payments Protocol, AP2, which is a new standard that allows AI agents to make secure purchases for you, backed by over 60 payment and tech giants.
So, first of all, it's good that they called it AP2 and not app because literally just have an acronym that is the word app. So, good job, guys, finding a way not to make it app. That's good. So, this is like an AI can like buy my groceries, book a flight. Like they're able to actually make not just like research the thing, but make the purchase on my behalf.
That's right. So the way it actually works is it's a secure digital mandate, is what they're calling it. And it's basically like a cryptographic contract to prove that you authorized the purchase. So whenever you want to buy something with help from an agent, you sign an intent to purchase mandate to start the search. And then you sign a cart mandate to approve the actual payment and have it go through. And so you have to have both available for real time transactions so that there's safety and transparency and that the agent doesn't just go rogue and spend all your money. And then I was skeptical of this until I heard of this use case. You can delegate tasks like snagging a sold out concert ticket, and you can have an agent tasked to sit in that line for you and then make the purchase on your behalf. And I can't tell you how much time this will save me every year because there are definitely concerts that I will like put on my calendar, tickets on sale at 10 a.m. And then I sit there and refresh my place in the queue, refresh until I've spent hours doing that for different concerts or theater tickets that I wanted.
And you see, we're going to get judged by which AI replaces us, but also by which concerts you spend hours waiting in line for tickets for. What's your concert? What's your waiting in hours in line for getting to?
I think the longest I ever sat in a line was actually not for a concert, it was for Hamilton tickets the first time, and then the second longest was for the Dead& Company's farewell shows at Oracle Park a couple years ago, and then, of course, they ended up doing more shows at the Sphere, but it was their last tour, and so
Yeah, so you did it.
lot of time spent in that queue. But now I can just have an agent sit in the queue. I mean, unless Bob Weir says no because he's, anti-AI, I'm gonna have an AI agent sit in the queue for me.
I'm not sure they can say no. I mean, the beauty of these agents is they're acting like you on your behalf through the same mechanisms that you would interact through. So this is pretty cool. Now, is this like new agey Bitcoin only, or what kind of payment mechanisms can I enable my AI agent through AP2 to use for me?
Jeff, if you are a new agey Bitcoin kind of guy, there's a solution for you. And if you are an old school ACH kind of gal like me, there's a solution for you too. So they basically have partnered with a bunch of different companies, Coinbase and other crypto leaders, but also just sort of the typical people that we're all used to, Amex, MasterCard, PayPal, Salesforce. Everyone's on board basically. So they have a pretty wide distribution and different payment types available depending on how you want to make your purchases, which is I think pretty critical for this type of functionality to have there be maximum sort of flexibility for the consumer.
I agree. That's and maybe that's the second judgment. The third judgment of ourselves is which I would not hook up Coinbase. I have a Coinbase, but that's not where I have any real transaction history. So maybe I'm just an old guy to get the gray hair showing on the side. So showing my age that I little credit card in there, little American Express over the Coinbase for my Dead and Co. ticket purchase.
It's amazing. You could probably build a model to guess somebody's age based on their preferred payment method. I was talking to my mom about something last night and she was telling me how she was going to write me a check. And I was like, do you think you could not write a check? And do you think you could instead just do this other thing? She's like, no, no, no. What? I'm writing a check. So anyway,
My kids don't know what checks are. They've seen them, but they're like, why would you do that? Why does anybody do that?
well, that was the same question I asked my mom. Why would you do that?
Yes, I do. My wife still likes to write checks. Now I'm gonna get in trouble for talking about my wife in the podcast, but I'm like, so we're out of checks. I'm like, how? When do we use them? What did you use? I don't
How do you
understand how
write
we use
so
checks.
many checks that we ran out of them?
I don't understand. But didn't they give us like 50? Like that should last like 100 years. I don't understand.
Well,
But
I'm the same. I'm not on the check bandwagon anymore. So
no checks. Well, if you're not ready to turn over your credit card or your Coinbase account or your checkbook, whatever your preferred payment mechanism is, to an AI agent, are you ready to turn your browser over? This may be the tipping point for browser-based AI agents as Google's Gemini is moving from the sidelines to the center of the Chrome experience and becoming free for everybody.
okay, so I have to actually ask because I like went to Google, I switched to AI mode, and I still am not clear on like what can it actually do for me or for a business. Like why do I care?
Well, so what they're really doing here is integrating the flagship Gemini assistant directly into the Chrome browser, kind of like the Comet browser that I've been using from Perplexity where the AI agent is built in, has access to your tabs, has access to some of the stuff you're doing, and can kind of take actions on your behalf in the browser. I haven't actually gotten this version yet in my Chrome, so I've been trying to snag the latest version before recording and didn't get it yet, but that's kind of the key. They're also giving Chrome access to workspace, so like Google Docs, Google Sheets, Gmail, Calendar, tight integrations into YouTube and Maps. So it can see what you're doing, it can answer questions about it, and it can take some actions on your behalf. So they're really trying to integrate this, but again, not where you have to go to the Gemini app, but where it's just built into the thing that most of us use to navigate almost every internet service when we're not on our phone, which is the browser.
Okay. And then how much is this gonna cost me?
It's free for everybody. They're actually pulling back the thing and putting this out free for all users, I think, really to drive some of that adoption and usage. And some of these more agentic capabilities, not quite out yet, but they're promising things like standing in line while you're waiting for shopping, or navigating a site and booking a restaurant reservation for you, or rescheduling deliveries, kind of things it can do through the browser acting on your behalf. I've used this a little bit with Comment, and it's really cool when you have some annoying task that you need to do and you just leave a tab and hand the tab over to the agent and go, please do these things for me, and I'll come back and check on your work and see how you're done. And it's a little different than it switches your behavior a little bit because you have to get used to it's not instant. It's not like having a chat with ChatGPT. You got to be like, hey, do this thing. And I'm going to leave that tab over there doing its thing. And I'm going to go do, just like asking an employee or a friend to do something. And then you're like, I'm going to come back in a few minutes and check. But it is a pretty cool capability and now rolling out for everybody directly into the most used browser in the world, Chrome. So I'm expecting us to see a lot more interesting use cases built around this as more people get access to it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And I think the agentic capabilities are really what people want. At least for me, that's really what I'm looking for. So the first thing I did when I went and tried it out is went and said, like, kind of did your use case that you talked about with Perplexity. Can you cancel this subscription for me? And then it told me all about why I should value my privacy and not allow it to do that. I'm like, no, but I want you to do that. So
Yeah, I'm willing to give up some privacy. I mean, I think we're gonna have to come to a high degree of trust with whoever your preferred AI provider is, because they're gonna have a lot of access to information. But it's a pretty good trade-off in terms of they can really cancel those difficult to cancel subscriptions for you. That's worth a lot to me. I'm willing to give up a little privacy if they can really book my flights and research a hotel. And I go, that one sounds great. Go ahead and book it. And I don't have to, oh, thanks. Let me click the web link and log into the site and whatever. Just go do it for me. That's a pretty big win. So we'll take it.
just go get it done. Okay, well, we've talked a lot in the past about the future of computer devices and the future of wearables and how, Sam Altman said that thing a while ago about how like the next big thing won't have a screen. Meta has just brought us a little bit one step closer. So here's a question. What if your glasses could respond to your thoughts before you even move or react to them? This is pretty crazy to think about.
Creepy.
Uh,
I'm not
yeah, a
gonna
little
lie, a little
creepy,
creepy.
but creepy and cool. That's like the whole thing about AI. It's creepy and cool. Meta just unveiled a bold new step in wearable technology with Meta Connect, which is basically a pair of Ray-Ban display glasses. And these are the smart glasses, but they have a display that shows your messages, notifications, navigations, etc., working hand in hand with something that they're calling neural band.
All right, neural band reminds me of Neuralink. Is a brain like what is neural band? I hope it's not like I have to wear a little ball cap with little little nodes in
You
my
don't
head.
have to wear a cap, you just have to wear a wristband. And the wristband, sort of detects electrical signals from your muscles before you can even be making visible movement. So, like, before you're making visible movement, it's detecting, I guess, how you're gonna move, and that means that you can control your glasses, send a message, navigate directions, switch apps, just by making tiny, almost invisible motions with your hands. And then over time, the neural band learns your patterns of like, what are your hand motions that signify X or Y, so that the interface feels seamless, like the glasses are sort of reading your intent. Seems mind boggling.
It does, and I've read some reviews of people who've actually got to try this out at MetaConnect, and they just say it's as mind-boggling as it sounds. One of the beauties is you don't have to put, for like the Vision Pro, you have to have your hand in the line of sight of the camera on the front to detect because it's visually seeing what you do with your fingers. So when you tap or whatever, and this because it's on your wrist, it can detect. You could be under the table, it could be behind your back, it could be in your pocket, and all you got to do is tap your fingers in certain patterns, and it can learn. And they say they're working on a thing where you can basically draw letters on a table or whatever to write a message, and they're like, it's kind of creepy good, like it's surprisingly effective, because of the band is reading the electrical signals to your muscles. It doesn't take a big motion, it's just reading the electrical signal. So I don't know, this sounds pretty cool, and I've been looking for a pair of glasses with a small display so I can not have texts or calendar events or whatever read out loud, but I can just see a little pop up. Oh yeah, you got a meeting coming up in 5 minutes. Don't forget to leave. Or your wife texted you and you go, okay, what's that? I won't pull my phone out. I don't need it read out loud in my glasses. Can I just see what she said so I can see if it's important, or if it's just like, texting me an article about AI I need to read later. So I actually pretty excited for these. I tried to get an appointment to try them out, and the first one was in November to go into a Ray-Ban store and just try them on. before you buy one. So, I'll be waiting a while apparently to spend my $800 on Meta Ray-Ban display glasses.
I don't have a pair of the Meta glasses, so I hadn't really thought about that, but if the idea is to make it less awkward, it's actually probably more awkward to be, like, swiping on your eyeballs than anything, so they almost have to come up with this, like, messing with your glasses is less awkward than messing with your phone because everyone's used to people messing with their phone, so this seems like a kinda necessary step for wearables to actually go mainstream.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise because they kind of demoed this capability when they showed the Orion, which is a super high res display, theoretically like 10 grand to build. And this is so people were a little surprised that this version with the display and the neural band came out. I think a lot of analysts not thinking that production timelines were quite this fast. So, and this inexpensive $800 is a lot of money for sunglasses, but at the same time, that neural band, people thought that alone would be 800 or $1,000. So, the idea that you're getting high quality glasses with the display built in and the neural band for $800, pretty good deal. It seems like to me, at least that was my reaction.
Yeah, well, I mean, you might not usually spend $800 on sunglasses, but there are a lot of people who do. So, a lot of people who are like, "That's fine." So,
Now, was it only the display glasses? I know they've got the regular. They announced some Oakleys that we showed earlier. Was there updates to any of their non-display glasses that were announced at this thing?
yes, there were some updates to other things besides just the display piece. The Ray-Ban Meta Gen 2 doubles battery life for 8 hours. Obviously, that is pretty important if you're gonna be wearing your glasses around, you don't want them to die after 2 hours. And then there's also an addition of Ultra HD video recordings. This is actually something that I have heard is the most popular use case of these glasses is to taking pictures and video, adding some better functionality to the actual picture and video capability. And then this one is really cool. Probably one of the most interesting features in my point of view. They call it a conversation focus, where if you are like in a loud room and you are talking with somebody, they can actually help sort of free out background noise so you can hear the single person you're talking to even in a noisy environment, which is great because how many times you're in a noisy environment, you just yell at each other because nobody can hear. Well, now you just put on your glasses and then you can kind of like dial into whoever you're talking about. So that's pretty cool. And then there's also Oakley's Meta Vanguard, which is designed specifically for athletes with a 9-hour battery life. It's water resistant and it has Garmin integration for real time fitness tracking. So a lot of new capabilities coming out on the wearable front.
Very cool updates. And they're theoretically launching real-time translation as well. So you got this. The conversation focus was cool, and apparently on the display glasses, you get closed captioning. Like I love closed captioning. I watch it on all my TV shows and movies. Now, I don't know about you, I've gotten to the age where I need the closed captioning on, the subtitles for everything, despite having no theoretically hearing problems. But it's like the idea of like subtitles for real life sounds pretty awesome, to be honest. Especially in noisy environment, like that would be really cool.
Yeah, I love the idea of subtitles for real life. I'm the same way, like, when I go to a movie theater now, which I don't do very often, but I'm like, I don't even know how to watch a movie without subtitles anymore. I'm so used to having subtitles that I feel like I'm gonna have to watch the movie twice just to figure out what was going on without the subtitles.
It might be the reason we don't go to the theater anymore. I'm like, I got the subtitles on all the time. It's great. My kids are like, "Why do you do that?" I'm like, "Look, call me in 20, 30 years, and we can have this conversation in 30 years. But until then, just accept it."
Okay, so here's the question. Will we all start going back to the movie theater once we have these glasses? We can just put them on and then the subtitles will go on the glasses, so you can get the subtitles on the movie.
It's a much longer conversation. I don't think so. I think we love the convenience. I mean, now your screens are so big at home. The delta when we were younger, not to age ourselves, but between watching a movie at home and watching a movie in the theater was so massive. It was just a huge difference. And now it's like, got a really nice sound system. I got a big screen. I can stop the movie whenever I want to go grab snacks or just like, it's just a really nice experience at home. And I'm not sure we haven't lost something as a society for that, but I don't, at least my family, not going back to the theater. I think we're more stuck with the Netflix at home.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Well, that's a lot of product news. We covered a lot of stuff. We had a couple of things that we had to cut because there's so much going on in the space, but these were the top stories. But let's move on to talk about a couple stories of like AI in the wild. And, I think this may be a first for us here on the podcast. First in the world, what happens when a government replaces a minister with artificial intelligence?
Okay, so we asked, can we create your ad or replace your ad agency, replace your podcast? Now you're saying, can we replace your government? I got to be honest, this at this moment in the United States, that sounds pretty interesting. So tell me about it.
Well, this is not the United States. I'm sorry to tell you, we're not. Nobody in the federal government here being replaced, but Albania has just appointed the world's first AI-powered cabinet minister. They call her Dila, Diella, a virtual government official now in charge of awarding all public procurement contracts. Prime Minister Edi Rama introduced her this week, claiming that AI could, quote, eliminate bribes and threats. end quote, for the decision-making process, and she's already handled citizens' requests through Albania's e-government portal, but her new role places her in the center of billions of dollars of government spending. This is kind of crazy to me. We're turning over government procurement to an AI.
It's wild. So it's not like it started out as like a chat bot for citizens where you could like send in a complaint. And then now it's actually like
Got a
running
promotion.
a core economic function.
Got promoted up the chain, no longer just handling citizen inquiries, now managing procurement contracts.
Well, she worked really hard. She earned that promo.
Clearly, she did, breaking glass ceiling all over the place here. So I love it. I think you can have a certain perspective on this from America, but I do think in other areas where you have more corruption prone issues where there's, lack of transparency around decision making, maybe bribes or kind of conflicts of interest that happen a lot more. It's a really interesting idea to bring kind of transparency, fairness, and kind of equity to the process of awarding contracts and maybe just, awarding them based on the proper mechanisms and metrics. So that's, I think, kind of what they're betting on here.
I mean, it's a big bet. And it's also a pretty risky bet because somebody at the end of some chain somewhere is overseeing her and training her. Like, who's doing that? What's happening there? Is it a bunch of corrupt people anyway?
So, we haven't really clarified exactly what human oversight is existing in this. So it's not really clear, and we don't have all the information on the train data. So what biases may or may not be baked into the approach being used here. So this is, a really interesting idea. I think there's a lot of opportunity. They're being a little circumspect about the details of how it works, which, to be fair, you may not want to tell the people writing the procurement contracts exactly how they're being analyzed by the AI because it makes it easier to have, you could call it search engine, procurement engine optimization in all of your contracts by people trying to kind of game the system in terms of getting higher ranking than they may deserve on the metrics. So it's unclear to me if this is like more publicity stunt and kind of sexy sounding, but not really a running large function of the government, or if it's real. But it'll be interesting to watch. But they're out there making a big splash with it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I guess the question is like, you could definitely imagine where this could be a pretty interesting future to have the government use a lot of, AI capabilities, but it's also, maybe just a publicity stunt. It'll be interesting to see what kind of transpires. And like I said, who's watching it? How's it doing?
And what part of the process does it really own? Is it evaluating first run and giving initial scores and then people and highlighting areas to dive into on a competitive contract? Or is it like making a final decision, or where does that sit? And it'll be really interesting to see how the tool really ends up being used in practice. Cause we say this a lot, but the actual deployment strategy style, what's being implemented and how it's being used in which parts of the process is really the most important issue on how well these systems work. And we don't really know at the point for this cabinet minister, but first government appointed cabinet minister in the world. It's an AI. I love it. It's fun to see.
It is fun to see. Okay, well, there would be no What the AI episode would be complete without talking about healthcare. So let's talk a little bit about healthcare. This is a pretty cool one this year. Can AI predict your future health years or actually even decades in advance? Researchers have just unveiled Delphi 2M, which is a groundbreaking AI model that uses generative transformers, which is basically the same kind of like deep learning technique behind things like ChatGPT, to model how disease will develop and progress and interact in humans over a lifetime. So not just 1 year, 3 years, a lifetime.
This was fascinating to me, especially because we talk a lot about AI healthcare models, and they tend to be very specific prediction. I'm predicting a protein fold, or I'm predicting, the vaccine or MIT, which vaccine is going to be most. But here they're using a generative transformer. Like this is the stuff that underlies ChatGPT or Gemini or any of the LLMs. Talk to me about what is going on with this. Why are they using this kind of model?
It's super interesting. Like you said, like most of the stuff we've talked about is like, okay, I have this diagnosis. How will it play out? Or I have this symptom. How will it play out? So it's very focused on sort of a single disease or a single outcome. But with a generative transformers, it's a really sophisticated model that was originally designed for sort of like natural language thinking, writing, conversation, etc. But it turns out when you apply it to health data, it can learn the sequence and the timing of multiple diseases across a person's life, considering everything from the diagnosis, lifestyle, demographic factors. And it means it can actually simulate a person's holistic health journey with the sort of complex comorbidity or multi-morbidity issue, which is like if you get this one thing, you're likely to get another thing. As an example, I said last week, I'm a type 1 diabetic. Type 1 diabetics are often also likely to get celiac disease or other autoimmune diseases. So it can realistically sort of project things like that of the progression of multiple diseases over time more realistically than older models.
It is really interesting when you think about what made these models so smart in language was the ability to look at the history, like not just the last word in a sentence, but the last paragraph that had been written to understand what should come next. And so similar here in healthcare, where you're saying, hey, the history of the totality of my history is important, not just this one scan I want you to read and tell me what it says. Like, no, it's helpful to know the whole thing. So this makes sense. And it sounds reasonable, but it seems kind of hard to do. How did they get the data for lots of people over a long history of time? What is this kind of trained on, and what are we using it for?
I'm sure it was hard to do. So, like,
But nine's hard
yes,
to talk about, so it's good. Yeah.
yes. So much easier to talk about than to do. But so the model was trained on 500,000 UK biobank records and validated on 1.9 million Danish individuals. And in its testing, you saw it accurately predicted over 1,000 diseases at rates comparable to the best single disease risk models, but for multiple diseases simultaneously, as I talked about. And so that generative nature means it can sample potential future health scenarios up to 20 years ahead. So it's kind of like being able to see the future and see a likely disease burden for a regional population decades in the future before it actually comes to fruition. It can model the effects of interventions on healthcare costs, insurance risk, et cetera. And I think like the really interesting thing here for individuals is there's always this question I think people used to ask themselves of like, okay, well, if you knew something was going to happen, would you want to know? And I think a lot of times people are like, well, no, I wouldn't want to see the future. This will let you see the future in a way that's preventative. It can actually make you change the future, right? You can see, okay, this thing is likely to happen to me. I need to change this about my diet or this about my exercise regime, or I need to get testing on this thing so I can catch it early if it actually ends up being a problem for me. So it's pretty interesting advancement in the preventative medicine front.
Well, and also, it's interesting you talk about insurance costs, and some of those aspects are really more about system level, community wide health things. So it's really interesting to think about it in my particular case. What things am I most likely to get? But also looking at a population level, what things does the public healthcare system need to be well designed for 10 or 20 years from now, which are investments we may need to start making today? What are we seeing coming down the pipe systemically? So it is a kind of model that's really fascinating, not just in its ability to help an individual manage their health over a longer time horizon, understand why we come down the road, but to help, if used in the right way, a population level of public health system be prepared for what they expect to see generally over the next period of time. That's pretty exciting. That's pretty cool. If we can actually get the right access to data to make those predictions at a population level.
Yeah, the access to data thing is actually, and we're going to talk about privacy in a second, but the access to data thing was interesting for me here because I think so many people have this perception of wanting to keep their health data private. And look at the amazing outcome for humanity that can happen when you take few million people's health data and train a model on it. Like, there's such a powerful outcome in that type of thing. So it's just super interesting to think about, like, we worry about our individual privacy, but by giving up some of that privacy, how much good can you actually bring to mankind?
Well, and the question also being, how much can you de-identify that data where it's my health record? The model doesn't need to know that it was Jeff's. It just needs to know that a person had this series of health outcomes. And with the right removal of personal information, it's not really a privacy question or issue anymore. It's like, oh yeah, we've de-identified that. It's obviously there's a lot of technical work and how easy it is to de-identify data and properly doing that. But it is really valuable when you think about collecting all that data from individuals in an anonymized way. And then you can make these pretty amazing models that have a lot of value for humanity. So good trade-off. But while we are talking about privacy, let's go on to our next story. Is this the dawn of truly private AI? Google dropped a new Vault Gemma, its first privacy-preserving language model designed so that your data doesn't become tomorrow's autocomplete in Gemini.
And how does it do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, so Vault Gamma uses the technique called differential privacy. And basically, it adds carefully calibrated noise into the training data during training so the model can't memorize or regurgitate specific pieces of sensitive information, even if that data was actually in its training data set. So it's kind of like scattering a little white noise into the image so that it won't be able to memorize specific pieces of data.
Okay, but devil's advocate on that is if you add noise, are you making the AI less accurate? Like the great thing about AI is when it's accurate. If you add noise, doesn't that make it just less good at its job?
That is the trade-off, and Google's researchers were trying to balance the privacy with performance. mapping out what they called scaling laws for private AI. But the results are pretty good. Gemma, with just 1 billion parameters, so not a huge model at this point, performs on par with non-private models of the same size, which is pretty good given that they were using this kind of noise insertion. I think they're pretty targeted in the kinds of noise they insert because there's only certain kinds of data you don't want it to memorize, names, social security number, whatever pieces of personal information you're trying to pull out of that. And so when you're doing that, they were able to get it pretty close to same accuracy. But again, this is a pretty small model at this point, so yet to be seen if they can pull this off at larger scale and with more complex types of data to remain private.
Yeah. Are we launch ready? How far from launch ready are we on that?
Yeah, I think it's launch ready for these small scale models, which are very usable in certain contexts, right? There are certain contexts where this could be super valuable. But for the large scale language models, for the chat GPTs, Geminis, Claude's the world, this is really not a solution that's ready for scale yet. But, it's great to see people like Google investing in the research in this area and finding ways. We're seeing this with reduction of inference costs. We're seeing this with different kinds of methods. And so I think this is great to see them researching how could we maybe reduce hallucinations, but also improve privacy for data that was in the training data set for these models. So nice movement forward, a nice contribution to the space by Google.
All right. Well, so Google had some wins on the board this week. Nano Banana top in the app charts. This Vault Gemma thing that's the first private Gemini. Now, they also had some L's or some prospective L's that they got on the board this week too. They are getting accused of stealing the lifeblood of publishing. Rolling Stone's parent company, Penske Media, thinks that that's what Google is doing, and they're taking Google to court.
Wait, so Google's getting sued for AI search? I feel like there's a lot of losses going on with with Google these days.
I
What
know.
is this
That's
one
why they
about?
had to
How did
get
we
some
get
dubs
here?
on the board there.
Yeah, you got a couple dubs. You can't be all dubs. It doesn't work that way in this world, even for big tech companies. So tell me about what's the claim here? What's going on?
Okay, so this is a story. Penske Media Corporation, which is, of course, behind Rolling Stone, Hollywood Reporter, they have filed a landmark lawsuit against Google, becoming the first major U.S. media company to take legal action over Google's new AI overviews in search results. The AI summaries appear at the top of the Google search, providing users with sort of quick, synthesized answers, and they're fast and complete. And they are, in fact, so fast and so complete that a lot of users just don't bother clicking through to the source anymore, which, of course, is a problem for the people that are producing the source.
Yeah, that does sound like a problem. And this is interesting because it's not. I mean, let's take a step back. This is the AI overviews. This is in a traditional Google search, not a Gemini search where I go in and ask for something and it summarizes. This is I go to Google and now you'll see that little summary often at the top in the AI mode or whatever they're calling it, AI overviews, where you are being kind of given a summary. And so this is what they're being sued over, which is interesting because it's not exactly the Gemini chatbot the way ChatGPT or Claude is, but it's actually Google search and the AI insertion into that process that they're being sued over.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I feel like Google is between a rock and a hard place there because obviously all of their advertisers and people that rely on them have a point of view here, but also so do all of their consumers. And if they don't have some sort of great AI search, they're just going to lose market share to Perplexity and to other people who are embedding AI in their search functionality. So they're sort of between a rock and a hard place on how to sort of manage that.
They're between a rock and a hard place with themselves in terms of if they just turn Google into chat, they lose a lot of money because they make a lot of money on the ads that come from Google search. And so they want the overviews there, but they don't want people to not click anything below the overviews because it's where the traffic to the Penske media sites comes from, but it's also where Google's revenue comes from when those are advertising based links. So that's not great for them in a way that it is not a problem for ChatGPT or Anthropic because they never made money on the advertising there. They're not losing anything. It's all de novo. But their publisher's also upset because they're going, well, if you just switched everything over to that chat interface everybody wants, we would lose all of our traffic and all of our money. And they're not pushing ChatGPT or Anthropic in the same way because they're not used to getting any traffic. I mean, any traffic they get from ChatGPT is brand new. They never got that before. And so it feels like a win versus for Google, it can feel like a loss because you're getting traffic, but not as much. And that not as much is a difference.
It's a very hard problem to figure out how to solve, and like I said, like, Google's between a rock and a hard place, not just with its customers, and like you said, it's also with itself, like, it's stealing its own revenue also by providing this functionality. But so Penske's claim is that the affiliate link revenue has dropped by over a third, so, like, a pretty significant drop, yeah, and they're directly blaming Google's AI overview for that specific amount of drop off, saying that it's kind of siphoned off readers and then by extension, their sort of advertising income. And they argue that they're trapped because people like Rolling Stone, Penske Media are also between a rock and a hard place because they could block themselves from being available to the Google AI model and then cut that problem off. But then they also don't get visible online. Because if you're not visible with Google, then who are you? Right? So, like, how do you solve that problem? And so it's a very complex problem, and it kinda begs the question if over time, even Google is gonna have to go the route of, like, ChatGPT where they're it's a subscription model that people are paying for, but I don't know how it's gonna be solved.
I do think this adds some salience to the conversation we had last week about the payments protocol for publishers whose materials, is used in training, and or is used in this kind of way is more of like a rag. And you could just say, hey, when you use my content for an AI overview, like I should get some amount of revenue from that, from these AI models. It is also, just to get a little technical for a minute, really interesting because the AI overviews in Google search are trained off of the Google search bots crawling, which is different than the Google Gemini bots crawling. So you can stop Google's AI models from crawling your site if you want and keep it out of Gemini the way you can for OpenAI or others. But keep it out of AI overviews is the same crawler as Google search. And so if you don't want you to be in AI overviews, when you block that bot from crawling your site, you block Google search, which is obviously something very different than blocking the Gemini bot from crawling your content. And so this is a really tough spot for publishers. I don't know how Google could change that necessarily, but this kind of question of the economics will be a big one. Are there other companies that have had similar perspectives on this? And what does Google have to say?
Yeah, I mean, well, we've talked about a few of these from other companies before. So ed tech companies like Chegg, and I think even what's the one that starts with a K? I can't even remember, but like a tutoring group also went after Google for this. European publishers have also filed lawsuits. So Google's lawyers are pretty busy these days. They have like they got a lot of people coming after them for this functionality. And one of the lawsuits actually refers to it as the definition of theft. So that's pretty interesting. But, Google claims that the AI overview just makes search more helpful. And actually, over time, will increase usage because it's more helpful. People like to use things that are more helpful. But of course, publishers don't really agree with that so much because they just want the clicks.
This is this interesting debate we have at a regulatory level, which is like, do we care about the consumer experience being better? This is a better consumer experience. Do we care about some sense of the market and either the competitors to Google in some of the antitrust cases or the publishers of content? And those two sets are at odds. Those two values and incentives are at odds. And theoretically, we care about both. And so there's a very delicate balance to be achieved here, either by Google or by regulators, which is you don't really want to limit them in such a way that the service gets worse for people. That's not good for anybody to make the consumer experience worse, but you also don't want all the publishers going out of business. So we got to find a way to kind of make all these things work together. And that'll be the challenge for the next, I don't know, decade probably. So plenty more podcasts and content for these humans.
Yeah, it's challenging because the consumer experience is better, but the consumer experience will get worse if the problem's not solved. Because what'll happen is when the content generators are not getting paid, you will get less high quality content feeding those AI summaries, and so it'll all just become trash over time if like we don't figure out how to get this right. So I guess it's in the hands of the courts to figure out how to get it right, which is maybe not my favorite place for it to be, but alas, here we are.
The way the system works.
Well, also speaking of people being at the hands of the courts, last week we talked about OpenAI and challenges that it has over teen usage. And so last week we talked about a thing that they had announced with basically parental oversight, parental controls, where parents can kind of see what their kids are doing. This week, they went even further. They took things a little bit further, and they have unveiled sweeping new protections for teenage ChatGPT users, which is a pretty unprecedented move for the generative AI space.
Interesting. So what are they doing here? They're preventing teenagers from using ChatGPT, or what are they doing?
Effectively not totally preventing them from using it, but limiting how they're using it. So they're basically rolling out a technology that will estimate your age. Of course, they can build models for anything, and so they can tell by your queries and your search patterns and probably your language and God knows what else how old you are. And then if it suspects that you're a teen, even it will err on the side of caution, so it will assume you are a teen even if it's not sure. They're going to put extra restrictions on what you can and can't do, and you get a more limited version of ChatGPT if you are detected to be a teen, even if you're trying to circumvent sort of traditional age checks. It used to be that teenagers could just lie and say they were over 13, but now ChatGPT is like, I'm going to build a model. I know you're not over 13. I can tell by the fact that you used Skibbity.
I know this not, and I gotta like take all the brain rot where I gotta stop saying bro to any of my. If I call ChatGPT bro, I'm gonna get limited versions. So I gotta be careful that I don't like throw any skibbities or bros into my
You got
chat.
to start adulting with ChatGPT.
I know if my kids get a hold of my ChatGPT account, I'm going to end up in limited mode because they type that way. What does limited mean? What is, okay, limited mode or limited set of features? What is that?
So it basically will block explicit or self-harm content. Basically, the blocks are extending to creative use of the assistant, stories, songs, you name it. And also the thing I mentioned at the beginning, the parental controls that lets links accounts with the teen, customize the restrictions, and get alerts if the system senses any sort of mental health crisis. So if things get serious, they'll also notify authorities.
I would just love to be able to like right now I've got my teens on some, plus accounts of ChatGPT and they're just all independent. I got to go set up 3 different billing on the same credit card. And I'm like, can I just get a family thing where I can connect the way many services do and have some visibility or control into what my kids are doing? They probably won't love that, but just don't tell them that that's a feature. Just tell them dad's paying for the plus version and maybe we get it through there without any complaints.
That's right. So, but CEO Sam Altman has basically said the company's own principles like freedom, safety, privacy are sometimes at odds. And so these changes sort of reflect a attempt or commitment by OpenAI to find the right balance between those things. And of course, this is after a summer of high profile incidents involving AI and mental health. So OpenAI is clearly responding to sort of both the regulatory scrutiny, but also I think the real world risks that they're facing. I do not think that when they built this like amazing model that can do all these things that they thought that some of their number one users were going to be teens needing homework help or teens needing to simulate a relationship. But it turns out that's a big part of their user base and they have to address that.
Yeah, the teens are certainly a big part. It seems like mostly they're asking for help with homework and explaining things, but these use cases that were not really intended to help me out with my relationship, whatever, are causing real issues for them. And so I think it's a reasonable balancing act for them to go, hey, we're gonna limit your usage in these things that we really didn't intend you to do anyway. We don't love limiting what you do with the model, but we're going to try and protect people, from things that weren't really the intended use case in the first place, but maybe are helpful to some people. So be interesting to see how this one plays out, but very interesting to see them taking kind of a firm stand and actually putting real restrictions in place. And with the guessing of the age by a model, not just the please tell me your birth date. And if you're under 13, I'll change the model, which everybody knows is a thing and nobody tells the right age. Parents cheat with their kids all the time because they're like, oh, well, let me sign up. If you say you're 13, just say you're 18, son. I go, oh, so you can guess it now.
Can guess it now. Yeah, I mean, it's a really challenging problem because obviously, I guess I was maybe naive as I've been reading about what's been going on here. I was naive about how kids were using ChatGPT. I sort of thought the use case of like using it for relationship advice or modeling was probably like some sort of wonky edge case. It turns out it's like relatively mainstream that it's being used for that use case, which sort of blew my mind. So anyway, it's an interesting problem, and I think something that all of us parents will wrap with more parenting advice because we like to talk about it. But how do we teach our kids to like interact IRL, right? Because there's so much
As if phones and
availability
social
for them.
media that weren't hard enough problems to help our teens deal with. Now we got to add proper usage with ChatGPT and potential self-harm and explicit situations to the list. Just so much, so easy to be parents now and figure all these things out. So much fun. And this has been a long episode of What the AI, despite the fact that we left 6 stories on the cutting room floor this week. There's just that much going on in the space, but that will be it for us this week. We'll be back next week with more insights, breakdowns, and those just head scratching What the AI moments. Be sure to subscribe and share this episode with a friend or colleague. Give us a rating or a like. It really is how people mostly can find us, and share this episode with anybody you know who's trying to figure out AI in their world. And if you've got a question, an interesting prompt, or a story we ought to cover, email us at email@whattheai.fm. We'd love to feature it. Until then, Annie, I will see you next week.
See you next week.
Ready to expand your AI knowledge? Want to become the go-to AI expert in your organization? Take the next step with Upstart's AI certification for financial services. This comprehensive course simplifies the fundamentals of artificial intelligence for financial services professionals. Both the course and this podcast are brought to you by Upstart, whose leading AI lending marketplace connects millions of consumers to banks and credit unions that leverage Upstart's AI technology to deliver superior credit products, from personal loans to auto loans to home equity lines of credit. If you learned something useful this week, hit subscribe on YouTube or leave us a rating on iTunes or Spotify. Your support can help others discover What the AI. And finally, share your biggest AI questions and insights with us at email@whattheai.fm. We really do read every message, and we do our best to cover them all on the show.